Hello and welcome to our MMWire debate on the role of tech in advice. Advice models are evolving all the time, from pure face-to-face advice to online models to robo-advice. There's now even talk of so-called bionic advice, where technology and human interaction combine. Technology has been dubbed by some as the surefire way to boost access to advice, but is this actually the case? Can advisors find a way to work with rather than against robo-advice? And what happens when automated advice goes wrong? To answer these questions, I'm joined by Ian McKenna from the Finance and Technology Research Centre, Jason Butler, a former advisor and now independent financial expert, Mike Barrett, Consulting Director at the Lancat, and Sham Gill, Head of Strategy and Proposition at SSP. Sham, I'm going to start with you first of all because there's been quite a lot of attention in terms of robo-advice and tech and how that plays into advice generally, and that technology is somehow this great white hope that's going to, cure all the ills, boost access to advice, reduce the costs, everything under the sun. Do you think technology and its role in advice is the silver bullet that people say it is?
I'm certainly convinced that technology has a great role to play in advice, and I think it's well understood that we have an advice gap in the UK market. So technology has an absolute place to play. Whether it's a silver bullet and can offer everything that we need to deliver to consumers, I'm yet to be convinced. I think robo-advice is an additional channel, a complementary channel to all of the other channels that are currently available. So whether those channels are online, face-to-face, telephony, and the other ways that people already get advice through social, through family, through interaction, robo's a welcome addition to that. Whether it can address everything, I don't think it can as it stands at the moment. I think it's too focused on limited parts of the advice chain, and I don't think the propositions I've seen to date are not holistic enough. They will evolve, and I think they will certainly get better as we move through, and I think we'll certainly see some new players entering this market to broaden that scope. So certainly a welcome addition, a silver bullet, not at the moment.
Okay, fine. And Mike, just to bring you in here, what do you think in terms of where technology sort of stops and starts? Where does it add benefit, and where is there kind of room for it to go wrong, potentially?
I think at the moment, the work we've been doing in the technology space and working with advisors, probably the more impressive deployments of technology are in the back office, in the middle office, and actually reducing the cost of delivering advice for an advisor firm and making it much more repeatable, consistent and scalable when the business grows larger. I think I would agree with the concerns about the propositions which are out there at the moment. Most of them seem to be contingent on a product sale, so putting you into a portfolio at the end of it, and very few of them are actually genuinely giving advice. It's an advice on an ISA, it's an advice on an investment product.
This idea that robo-advice isn't actually advice.
Yeah, it's advice with a product sale in mind, and the only way the organisation involved in it earns some money is if the product is sold at the end of that. I think we would like to see more innovation in just kind of general advice, which might well be purchase a product at the end of it, but actually things like perhaps your employer's pension, or paying off some debt, or putting into cash savings where actually there isn't a product sale at the end of it. I think that to address the advice gap issue is probably more what is needed than a bunch of ETFs at the end of it.
Okay, it's an interesting point actually, Ian, isn't it? And you've got the developments in technology and automation and the push towards that, but the advice evolution has been about service and not about the product. So do the two intertwine somehow? Are they at the moment?
Absolutely, they should do. I think we have to recognise that technology is increasingly embedded in every aspect of our lives. Think of the things that we do as a matter of course every day using technology. For example, if somebody had said to you 10 years ago that on a regular basis people would take pictures of each other on their phones and post them online, the average Facebook user has over 500 pictures posted on there. If you'd said that 10 years ago, and if you'd suggested that people in their 50s and 60s would be doing that 10 years ago, the default reaction, I think even now, might be, oh, well, teenagers do that. And it's not true. If you actually look, especially in people at retirement, are frequently sharing, they're going and having new adventures, and they're sharing those adventures using technology. Therefore, technology is embedded in their lives, and we need to find ways of getting our messages to help those customers in the mediums which they choose to use. If people still want to work in traditional ways, face-to-face and on paper, that's fine. But actually, if people are using technology more and more to gather information, if an advisor's not presenting their information in that space, they're missing out on an opportunity to communicate with the client. And actually, I would say, if a customer is going to look for financial information online and they're not coming to your site first, are they still your client, or are they a client looking for another advisor?
Okay. And Jason, what's been your experience kind of as an advisor? Were you in your business kind of receptive to using technology? What did you see kind of in the wider advice profession in terms of, is it a kind of a resistant thing like us versus them, this is a threat to my business, or are people prepared to work with it, do you think?
Well, I was an advisor for 25 years until the end of last year, as you know, and we worked with very complex clients in the main. But nevertheless, we were very keen to adopt technology for all the reasons that the other panellists have said, which is efficiency, reducing the cost, because we wanted to increase our profitability, right? Sure. That's the first thing. Yeah. And then obviously make sure it was affordable to the client. But we also wanted to give the client a good experience, and this is often missing from the whole debate. This is with financial services, we are not dealing with a rational purchase. We're not dealing with a sexy thing. We're dealing with a pain. We're dealing with behavioural biases. We're dealing with something that people would rather pull their own teeth out than actually deal with most people. Okay, so in our firm, yes, we did adopt technology, but like many firms, we had a great piece of financial planning software, a great CRM, a great document management, a great process flow control, MI over here. And whilst it is now quite knitted together, I understand, it still wasn't the silver bullet. But just to answer really touch on the points that all the panellists have said, technology is really about making sure that you can deliver to your client the experience that they want and that they need, and that you can do it profitably, consistently, and where it doesn't, hopefully it enables you to be the best version of you in terms of giving them their personal service. Now, until people realise that the product is the plan, not the product, okay, the products will be given away for free, I'm sure, within the next 10 years. I mean, I just don't think there'll be any margin insurance, investment management, or any of this stuff, unless you can, you know, get a silk purse out of a pig's ear. But the point here is that I think once you realise that the plan and the engagement process with the client, because we in our firm always did the planning with the client in the meeting. We did it on screen with them. Sure. It doesn't take a lot of a move to then say, okay, we can have people in call centres with screen sharing technology helping you build your plan with no preconceived idea that you're going to have a product or a portfolio or any of this. And that's all that's happening at the moment. People who want to sell digitalised portfolio management are using these digital front ends to try and draw people in. They're realising they can't get people to sign up because no one wants them other than a few people in financial services signing up to see what these various tools are. No one's actually putting money in with these things. So I think it's about when the plan becomes the product, when technology is seen as a way of immersing yourself with the client and a way of delivering a great outcome for them based on their desired lifestyle at a cost that they can afford on a subscription type model, that's when it will really, really take off.
Can I pick up on Ian, I just wanted to sort of drive that conversation a little bit more, because what Jason's describing is very idyllic in terms of, you know, if an advisor could sort of, I don't know, run a call centre where people are, you know, delivering a financial plan and things. But sometimes I think maybe there are some firms that go, well, that's all very well and good, but I haven't got the capital to invest in this tech. So how do I kind of capitalise on this kind of rise of the robot?
Well, this is where they need to find the right technology partners to work with. I mean, picking up on the point that Jason made there about some of the issues that one's trying to persuade customers to engage in are things which they would rather have their teeth pulled than engage with. And that's actually a great opportunity through the use of technology to give the customer the opportunity to acquire background, acquire knowledge, you know, before they come to talk to the advisor. So going back to my point about you want customers, when they're looking for financial information, when they're looking to grow their knowledge at their own pace and at a rate that they're comfortable with, to be coming to your site to have that access to information. But to again, to come back to your point, it's a matter of finding the right technology partners. I think advisors need to be very careful that they don't get distracted into trying to become software developers. Over the past 20,
There's a lot of noise
25
about that,
years,
isn't there? Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people. I saw a piece the other day that was saying, well, advisors should all build their own technology because then they'll have a differentiated proposition. Building technology in a robust way takes a lot of money and a significant amount of time.
And in a compliant
Tell
way
me
as
about
well.
it. Tell me about it. As an investor in a fintech
Absolutely.
startup, I know this. I feel the pain.
So, firms need to find the right partners that are building for scale, that they can source components with, and it's probably a matter for many of them of choosing the right their differentiation will come from the mix of best of breed components that they choose for the propositions that suit their customers' needs, rather than trying to build the software themselves.
Fine.
I think for most firms.
I think in that it also comes down to advisors focusing on how they manage that journey. So clients are going to want to start the journey possibly face to face, but then move online. Others will start online, want to come offline and then go back online. We see that in retail. We see that so commonly. People will look for something, they'll look for a new television, they then go in store, want to take a look at it, have that advice, and then go and make their purchase online. So it's really managing that interaction of being able to take people from online through to an offline
Danger that
acquisition.
sort of goes the other way, that you, like taking your retail example, I go and I want to buy, I don't know, an iPad, for example, and I go and I sort of go and test it out in the shop, and then I go, actually, I know what, I can get it on Amazon cheaper. And is there a danger that with advice that happens and you cut that kind of traditional advisor out of the process?
Absolutely, there is a danger, but it comes down to the value that your advice is giving and the trust that you build with the client. So John Lewis absolutely are not competing just on price. It's the service that goes with it, it's the interaction that goes with it. And I think in the advice market it's got to be the same. When a client comes from an online channel, how you deal with them, how you provide that advice, the service that you provide that client, if the only thing you're competing on is on in price, you're probably not going to be around in that advice market for much longer. You're going to be in very commodity market space.
I think it's really important to pick up on that. It's about how advisors are demonstrating the value they deliver on a regular basis. And a digital relationship gives you the opportunity to be communicating with your customers monthly, even weekly, if you like, drawing analysis, providing information to them. Who doesn't walk around with a mobile device these days? Who doesn't get information delivered to them? And that's actually a huge opportunity to be demonstrating the value that the advisor is adding by finding the right technology partners that can help you automate those insights that are going out to the customer and repeatedly building the advisor's brand and demonstrating the advisor's value.
But if we just talk about the existing advisors who are most of the people watching this programme, there is not an advice gap that they need to worry about in terms of their businesses. If they run a better business and provide clients with different means, as you say, perhaps face-to-face and then perhaps WebEx, a lot of people do WebExes for their review meetings and so on. It's not about a revolution here. This is about evolving the business. There is more than enough complex work to do with the boomers and the Generation Ys and so on. There's just not enough advisors to go round, so that technology is about you as the advisors grabbing more of that action that's out there, because the banks aren't trusted. The big groups, don't seem to be, it's one size fits all. Sure. And the regional and the sort of regional type size firms, they've got an opportunity to make technology, make them both slicker, quicker, more adaptable and more pervasive than they have been. In terms of the mass market, that's much more challenging. But if you are interested in the mass market and increase your numbers, how about this then? There could be guidance, which is educational engagement material, and let's play, whether it's a call centre and an unqualified person, that doesn't matter if it gets people thinking about planning, which could then morph into, out of say 10,000, that could be for free, and then for every 10,000 there might be 1,000 advice customers, but you've captured and warmed them up and got their trust before you then move them into a proper, full regulated, proper, complicated, more immersive experience.
Exactly, which is why engaging with an automated advice is actually far more about the future long-term value of advice businesses. Yeah, they're incubating the customers that don't have the wealth today but will have the wealth tomorrow, but finding a way to build relationships with those customers so you can provide them with some support and guidance. And it really is about building the long-term value. As Jason says, there's no shortage of customers at the moment for advisors in the traditional boomer market, but the question is, indeed, advisors are going through a boom time at the moment. I would suggest very strongly that they should be looking to take some of the profits they're achieving from that and invest that in building new digital relationships, which will significantly add to the future value of their businesses. Because if you've got an ongoing stream of customers coming through for the future, that's something that potential purchasers value.
But I just wondered if we perhaps should just talk about where the money comes from. Who's going to pay us? Okay, and I'd be interested to see what Mike, because he does a lot of consulting here.
Yeah.
You know, free, small subscription amount, then full service, what I call full intervention advice where it's complex and trigger points. I'd be interested to see what you think about that, Mike, in terms of the...
Yeah, I think looking at some of the systems which are out there, there's a lot of commonality. So there's a lot of common systems, as I said, delivering kind of an ETF portfolio at the end of it. But the value that those offer, completely agree with Ian. It's getting customers into a disciplined routine of saving and investing, and hopefully at a later point in their life that allows them to take advantage of full financial advice. I think the customer outcome there feels really positive, and that's probably the common factor across most of the robo-advice systems that are out there. If you're starting out saving, there's not a lot broadly that can go wrong. If the difference between buying a risk 5 and a risk 6 is not going to make a huge amount of difference. And actually, it's the behavioural point you touched on, where just getting on and doing something with your life and with your savings is actually probably going to deliver more value. But the part of why those are a positive customer outcome is that the total cost of ownership, the purchase of those investments, is actually pretty low, and in some cases dramatically lower than kind of traditional formats which investors might have previously been used to.
I'm just going to pause the question there just to remind you is that you're watching this debate live, so you can tweet us your questions using the hashtag MMWired, which is quite a nice way to segue into my first question. So we've got one question which is asking the panel, if a robot is delivering the advice and so should be unbiased when it comes to the recommendation, should such cases be allowed to attract commission? Shan, do you want to take that?
Sure. No.
No. Do you want to expand on your answer?
if it is advice, and that's probably the bigger question, is it actually advice? If it is advice, then it's got to come under the regime of being advice, and hence it's got to sit within the same framework, the FCA framework, that every other advisor operates under. So there needs to be a charge for that advice. Yes, I guess the client can choose where they pay that fee from, or the charge from. But I don't think it should
through the product,
or through another channel. But I don't think it should attract commission.
And Mike, what do you think?
I would completely agree. Commission, fee, whatever you call it, the customer ends up paying one way or another, and I'd rather it was much more transparent to the customer exactly who is being paid for what, and the services and the value that you could reasonably expect as a result of that particular fee, rather than going back to a world where actually it's all bundled up into one reasonably opaque charge which people can't understand what is going on.
I don't really understand the question, because commissions have been banned for 3 years now. So it doesn't matter whether it's digital, virtual service, or whether you come and meet me. It doesn't matter if the channel's irrelevant. The only difference is if you run in a vertically integrated business, which means you provide the product, the advice, like a certain organisation with lots of self-employed partners has, then that is essentially commission, because it's contingent product charging. Now, that is a different question. Contingent product charging for any advice, where you only get paid if you buy the product, and you can only pay via the product, which is in vertically integrated businesses, is a problem which I have been against for a long time. The FCA has been asleep at the wheel on this, and it doesn't matter if it's face-to-face or digital, that has a potential conflict all over it. And that is, I agree, you shouldn't be able to receive commission, full stop.
I think the issue the question is trying to tease out is that, and this is an issue for the regulator, the current structure is that commission is not prohibited on execution-only business, and we are seeing a number of the, and I try to avoid this term as much as possible, but the robo-advisors, a number of those are not advised propositions, they're non-advised, therefore they are actually able to take commission. And it's quite interesting when you dig into the detail, some are actually being very transparent and saying, we are not taking any commission.
Yeah.
If they're not making an explicit statement like that, people might want to think about it. So I think that's where there's a need for greater clarity. Okay. But it is really an issue that the FCA, it squarely would fall within their remit. I think another point about where the income's going to come from, it's worth considering how automated advice services can be delivered in the context of employee benefits, because particularly with the extension of from £150 a year to £500 within the budget, is there a significant opportunity as employers are, many of the larger, well, most larger firms now have had to auto-enroll their staff, but many more micro-employers coming through now, the opportunity to provide advice as a tax-free employee benefit is a huge opportunity and might well be a strong area where, rather than going to an individual and saying, you need to pay a price for this service, the ability to demonstrate to an employer that a workforce without financial stress is a more productive workforce, therefore there's a strong case for the employer paying for some financial guidance. That's a real revenue opportunity for the advisor community in the future.
It is, and as long as the government take it away from just being pensions advice to being general financial advice, that will be really good, helpful step. Please, if you're listening, anyone in government, we want the £500 tax-free amount for employers to pay, but we want it for general financial planning advice, which may or may not include pensions.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to move the conversation on slightly just to take another question. This one from Harry Taylor. Does robo-advice mean different things to different people, such as in the US versus the UK? Mike, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure many people really know what robo-advice means, actually. It sounds good, and the phrase has certainly been adopted now. I've seen kind of evolutions of that recently, and bionic advice and all of that, which just makes me want to weep. But I think there is a danger, which Ian has touched on, that people will go online, and certainly as financial services professionals, we can go in and look at different processes where the user experience is virtually identical, yet some are actually giving regulated advice and a personalised recommendation, and then another virtually identical website is not. Yeah. And I think there certainly is a danger that people will think that they are getting some sort of guidance or advice, and if you look deep down in the caveats, then actually they're not. And you've certainly got to look at that from the customer's point of view, where it's pretty difficult for most financial services professionals to try and work out the difference between guidance and advice. It's impossible, I think, for a customer to work out what is going on there. So if they are thinking they are getting advice, then I think the service should actually be regulated as such.
Is there an issue there, Sham, in terms of everything kind of looking quite identikit and engaging the consumer, but not having those appropriate disclaimers, and people actually think they're getting advice when they're clearly not, and they're just going through a decision tree process? And I mean, as a journalist, I'm always eyeing for the next mis-selling scandal, but is there an issue there in terms of people thinking they're getting advice when they're not, if more people are going into these models?
I think absolutely. I think unless that's absolutely clear at the beginning of the journey, because a consumer coming on, what you don't want to do is them having spent half an hour or 40 minutes of their time before you disclose that actually what you've got after going through this whole process is not advice, but originally you've given the view or certainly a perception that it is advice. That's got to be a very poor customer outcome as a result of it. So if those technology providers are not being clear, or those advisory firms are not being clear about what it is they're offering, then I think you're absolutely right. There is a very strong possibility that it will be certainly a strong case for mis-selling at the end of it. And it is about perception. Consumers don't necessarily read all of the fine print that is presented to them. I look at my car insurance or my house insurance and the number of policy booklets. Do I sit down and read every single clause? No, I don't. I have a basic understanding, and I take that perception about what I've just purchased away with me. So if the perception I've been given as I go through that process is that I'm getting some kind of advice and it is personalised to me, whereas if the reality is that it's an algorithm working at the background with no human intervention, that's quite a difference between my perception and the reality.
And
I think that has to be managed very carefully. And
I think that perception as well can be, the customer can kind of gain that perception through the brand of the organisation. So if there's a large brand saying we enable a positive future, we help with your financial future, we're helping you every step of the way, and all of the kind of the cliches which are trotted out on advertising, but then actually discovering that large brand is not taking any responsibility in terms of regulatory definition, then I think there does feel potentially a bit of a mismatch in the customer expectation versus the reality of what's being delivered to them.
Okay. I think that throws a challenge back to the advice community. if we want to put forward that advice is a specific benefit, perhaps we need to be clearer about articulating the benefits. We almost expect customers to understand the difference, and I don't think they do. And if it's, you know, I really do think if we're going to say that that difference between advised and non-advised is important, we need to be articulating clearly in terms that consumers understand what the value is. Otherwise, people won't go and look for it.
I think there's another danger here where I've certainly seen some stuff over from the US where it's gone into gamification.
Yeah.
And that's, yes, I understand
What
that
does
as
that look like?
So it's where a consumer goes through a journey, but it's presented more as a game. So it might be a Second Life type environment where you walk through and you map out what the things that you want and how your life might map out in order to build the model. Now, I
That
think
sounds
as an
creepy.
absolutely, and I think for education, brilliant, great piece. But for delivering advice, if the perception of the consumer is that they're entering a game mode to try and get to an end point of advice, I think that's quite dangerous because you're impacting people in such a fundamental way with the advice that you deliver. The advice that's given may impact them 30, 40 years down the line.
The challenge is there, though, that gamification does get engagement. And what we struggle with, and indeed it's been a recurring theme of this discussion this morning, that we're addressing issues that consumers are reluctant to face up to. Gamification, delivering information, you know, the organisations that build computer games understand how to get people's attention. So we can learn lessons from them. Where we need to do is find the balance. Gamification can be an excellent educational tool,
Absolutely.
but I would agree with you. We need to then actually, as part of the gamification, we need to be articulating the benefits of advice and the differences between advised and non-advised.
I mean, I think the way to look at this is that there's very different regulatory standards in the States than there is in the UK. Okay, they're asleep at the wheel when it comes to putting the client first. It's completely different. They get much different data integration issues. Their fiduciary standard they're talking about bringing in, we'll just bring them into the 1990s as far as I'm concerned. We know your client. The big issue, though, in terms of delivering good outcomes to clients, they're not interested about guidance or advice or gamification or any of that. Engage me. Let me understand what the issues are that I need to deal with, okay, and motivate me to do it. Hold my hand one way or another and take me through a journey and a continual journey, but which is stress-free and as less friction as possible. Help me understand what the options are and then help me choose an option that's hopefully going to give me the best outcome. We know there's no guarantees. Life has always been uncertain. I'm doing a talk on Friday about Brexit. You know, uncertainty, it's always been uncertain. This is just another reason for uncertainty, and you can't take out the fact that most people have not saved enough, they're going to live longer than they think, they're going to need more money than they think, and if they don't, they're all going to end up living on cat food. And that's the bottom line, and that's the point we need to get across to clients.
I agree. I think the point I was trying to raise is that sometimes with this technology, we have to be careful that we're not trying to oversimplify something that is quite complex. And I think it's that oversimplification that can be a challenge in its own right.
Agreed, but that's where we have the opportunity to change advice from being a couple of very concentrated meetings to something where we educate a customer over an extended period of time and provide them with the information that they need, that they can assimilate at their own pace.
Yeah, I agree. I think
It's how advice is changing.
That's right. We're moving into a situation of lots of smaller touches with clients. So it's not a big undigestible lump of stuff to do and a big hill to climb. We're talking about subscription models, perhaps £10 a month, the Netflix model. We're talking about engaging with people, video, holding their hand, and we're using technology as a means of stripping out all the costs. And we need to rethink the cost of what an advisor is and what they actually do.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of tech and advice. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much to our panellists, to Ian McKenna, to Jason Butler, to Mike Barrett and Sham Gill. Thank you very much for watching.